Anita, Lucas, thank you. For more on this, we're joined now by Democratic Congresswoman from Pennsylvania and member of the House Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, Chrissy Houlahan. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us on a Saturday and weighing in. We keep seeing these protests, and I want to get to that and get your thoughts. But let's just dive into what Lucas was just reporting. There's multiple letters, one of anonymous people in the administration condemning the administration's actions, the other supporting. What do you make of this? What do you make of the split, the divide, if you will?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here. And this is a really, really complicated situation. And there are obviously quite diverse opinions on what we should be doing right now. And it is the right of people to express their opinions, to articulate those in a safe and peaceful manner. It is also the right of people within the government to do the same. That being said, I do agree with the prior commentary that you were voicing, which is all of us serve, many people within the government serve at the pleasure of the president. And if for whatever reason they are not on board with what it is that the president is doing, they have options. And I think that it should be their responsibility to make sure that they are aligned with what it is that the administration is trying to do, with a fair amount of pushback, but that they make sure that they understand that we all are under one commander-in-chief.
Congresswoman, are you concerned about these growing protests? We had the one large one on the Mall. I covered it. That was pro-Israel, but most of them appear to be pro-Palestinian. In fact, I was covering the one that got violent out front of the DNC. I spoke to one of the protesters that was late Wednesday night outside the DNC where it got violent. And I asked her specifically about why they're doing this. And she basically said that so many Democrats are out of touch with the party's wishes. Listen here. I want to play it for you and get your reaction.
We've called our congresspeople, we have come to their offices as constituents, and we've tried to ask them to do what 80% of their base is asking for and call for a ceasefire. They're not listening.
Does 80% of the Democratic base support a ceasefire, in your opinion?
I don't believe that that is the case, to be really honest. When we're in our offices, we certainly are used to having constituents reach out to us, and we appreciate that with their opinions. Usually the opinions go one way or the other. People don't usually call you when they're happy with what it is that you're doing. So it's really hard for us to ascertain what the percentage is. Importantly, I serve all of the people in my district. I serve in a district that's 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, and 20% independent. And so it's my responsibility to listen to all of the people within my district and try to do the best I can to articulate that opinion and those ideas to Washington and to the leadership. But also, just as importantly, it's my responsibility to lead in reverse as well, to tell people what I'm learning, what I know about what's going on, and to help inform and educate them about what's going on in the global environment, so that we can all be hopefully as unified as possible during this really very difficult time.
And based on what you do know, are you calling for a ceasefire?
No, at this point in time, very importantly, it is very much the responsibility of Israel to protect and defend its sovereignty. It is also the responsibility of Israel to make sure that they're doing that under the laws of war. I have certainly called for that. I have also called for strategic pauses and humanitarian pauses, and I believe that's appropriate. But we also want to make sure that we are understanding that Hamas is a very vile and violent terrorist organization that absolutely needs to be taken out of power in the Gaza area. And so I believe that that can be done, should be done, but I also know that it needs very much to be done with respect to the internationally established law of war.
Some of your colleagues, notably those in the so-called squad, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, have really been constantly and frequently engaging in anti-Israel rhetoric. So much so, Politico now reporting that the progressive Democrats like the squad have gone to your minority leader, Jeffries, in asking for some help in countering AIPAC, the largest Israeli lobby in the U.S. that's trying to get pro-Israel Democrats in there in the primary to challenge them. What do you make of that?
So it's really important that when we're having these conversations, that people like us who are in positions like ours, members of Congress, lead with humanity, with civility and decency, and we lead with the interest of trying to unify our communities. And so I think it's important that when I listen to rhetoric from either side going on, that I ask questions, that I seek unity and harmony. And I understand that Rashida and Ilhan and those folks have a very different life experience than I do, and that my community and many in my community do. And so I'd like to ask them questions about this in the same way that I ask faith leaders in my own community about what's going on, and try to figure out a way to keep people together. Thankfully, in my community, we have been continuing to try to speak across the faiths. And I think that's very, very important, because if we don't have civil and decent conversations, then it's hopeless. I think that that's what's important right now. Very evil forces, frankly, are trying to divide us. Very, very evil forces. And we need to be listening to each other.
Congresswoman, I just want to point out for our viewers, you're seeing on your screen there, those are live rockets in Gaza. And just in the last 20 seconds or so I've got here, let me just ask you one final question. And that is, you're talking about unity as we watch rockets over Gaza, and you have a very big division with progressives in your party. Do Democrats have a problem in the House come next November over this issue?
I think that Democrats have demonstrated their humanity, their civility, and their decency. And I think that this is a complicated issue. And there are many, many people who there's more than enough sorrow going around right now. What we are trying to do is make sure that the hostages are freed. We're trying to make sure that the Palestinian people are safe, that the Israeli people are safe as well. And those are not, I think, complex issues. I think those are the values of the Democratic Party.
Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan, thank you very much for taking time as we continue to look at flares and rockets and all sorts of activity continues 43 days into this war in Israel. Congresswoman, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Anita?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.